Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. My name is Haikal, and I'll be presenting my MSc dissertation Research and Resilience in Trainee Counsellors, specifically exploring whether age, gender, or educational hiatus influence how resilient trainees are during emotionally intensive training. Before we look at the study itself, I'd like to briefly share how this project came about. In my training as a counselor, one thing that stood out immediately was the diversity in our cohort. Now, we came from a wide range of life stages and experiences, some from undergraduate study, others returning after years away, many balancing work, families, or other responsibilities. As the course progressed, I noticed that people responded to its emotional demands in very different ways. There were times I struggled too, juggling client work, academic deadlines, and personal reflection. I began to wonder what helps these trainees cope better than others. These informal observations turned into deeper conversations between my research group, while much of the literature focused on resilience building interventions. There seemed to be a gap around whether certain personal characteristics like age, gender, or time away from education might shape resilience from the outset. That curiosity, grounded in both personal experience and academic interest, became the starting point of this research. So, why focus on resilience in the first place? As training counselors, we face emotionally demanding challenges, working with different client material, managing academic pressure, and engaging in intensive self reflection. These experiences can trigger self doubt, emotional fatigue, or even burnout if not well supported. Now, resilience has many definitions. One of the definitions by Smith et al. Was the ability to bounce back from adversity, and crucially, that it's not fixed. Right. Other researchers have emphasized that resilience can be developed over time, particularly through educational experiences. Also, research has also shown that resilience acts as a protective buffer. Trainees with higher resilience are less likely to experience burnout, even in crisis contexts. During COVID-19 pandemic, resilience was key to maintaining well-being. Now, resilience has also been associated with emotional regulation, psychological stability, and stronger sense of purpose, all of which are essential in forming a robust professional identity. Finally, Chua et al. Found that resilience levels vary significantly across educational contexts, highlighting its relevance for curriculum design. Altogether, these findings show that resilience isn't just important, it's fundamental to successful, sustainable counseling training. While resilience has been widely studied in student populations, there are still key gaps when it comes to trainee counselors specifically. Papers have shown that resilience varies significantly across educational and cultural contexts, suggesting that it's not one size fits all construct. This aligns with papers by Walker et al. And Wendell, who argue that resilience can be developed through challenge and reflection, especially in learning environments. Now, age is often assumed to predict greater resilience due to increased emotional regulation and life experience. However, more recent findings question this assumption. They suggest that age alone may be less predictive than factors like mental health stability and support systems. A paper by Harrington even pointed out that returning to study later in life can introduce new stresses such as academic self-doubt or juggling responsibilities. Gender has also produced mixed findings. Some papers have reported that high resilience observed in female students, possibly due to emotional expressiveness and social support. Meanwhile, others have found that higher resilience scores are evident in men in specific contexts. These inconsistencies highlight the need to avoid overgeneralizing gender differences. Now, as for educational background, some studies suggest that mature or non-traditional students may have higher resilience due to broader life experience. However, this isn't guaranteed. Returning to education can also lead to anxiety and adjustment challenges. Overall, a paper by Brinkoff emphasizes that resilience may be more influenced by training contexts and support than by fixed traits like age or gender. Together, these studies point to the need to examine demographic variables within the specific demands of counsellor training. Many studies focus on resilience interventions like mindfulness or reflective practice, but far fewer ask whether people begin training with different resilience levels based on personal characteristics. Demographic variables like age, gender, and especially educational hiatus have received little focus, especially in this population. And while some studies consider these variables independently, few compare them side by side using quantitative methods. Now our project, addressed this gap by testing 5 different hypotheses through 2 correlations, 2 ANOVAs, and 1 t-test, each aimed at examining whether resilience differs by demographic background. This study set out to explore whether 3 demographic characteristics, age, gender, and educational hiatus, are related to resilience levels in trainee counsellors. These variables were chosen not only because they appear in the literature, but because they reflected real differences I observed within my own cohort. They represent life experiences that might influence how trainees manage the emotional and academic pressures of the course. Resilience was measured using the BRS, the Brief Resilience Scale, by Smith et al., which assesses how well individuals recover from stress, making it particularly relevant to the counselling training context. The study explored whether there's a relationship between resilience and age, resilience and educational hiatus. Does resilience differ by age, gender, or educational hiatus? To answer these, I ran 5 separate statistical tests, 2 Pearson's correlations, 2 ANOVAs, and 1 independent samples t-test. The study followed a quantitative cross-sectional design with a non-experimental approach. It aimed to explore the relationship between resilience and basic demographic factors in a natural training setting. The participants were 47 trainee counsellors based in the UK, each between 19 and 62. Recruitment was carried out through several routes: the SONA system at Bangor University, email invitations shared by placement coordinators, and outreach to academic contacts at other training institutions. Participants were eligible if they were aged 18 or over and currently enrolled on a level 4 or higher counselling qualification in the UK. Some participants received course credit through SONA, while others volunteered without incentive. All responses were collected anonymously via the SCI toolkit. Now, the survey included the BRS, and it was paired with a short demographic questionnaire, including the age, gender, and educational hiatus. I analyzed the data using SPSS, applying correlational and group comparison methods. To begin, I ran 2 Pearson's correlations. The first tested the relationship between the age and resilience, and the second examined the link between educational hiatus and resilience. Now, neither correlation was statistically significant. For age, the correlation was negative but small and not significant. For educational hiatus, there was no notable trend. Now, this suggests that neither age nor time away from education alone had a measurable impact on resilience levels in this group. Next, I ran an independent samples t-test to see if there was a difference in resilience scores between male and females. For this statistical test, we had to exclude 3 participants who preferred to self-identify because the sample size was too small. Right? So instead, we had 44 participants in this analysis. The difference in means was small and not statistically significant, although male participants had slightly higher resilience scores on average. This difference did not reach significance. Now, this supports the idea that gender alone does not meaningfully explain variations in resilience in this sample. Finally, I conducted 2 one-way ANOVAs. The first compared resilience scores across 3 age groups, and the second compared resilience across 3 different hiatus groups. Again, no statistically significant differences were found in either case. Now, this means resilience levels were consistent across both age categories and hiatus lengths. These findings suggest that at least in the sample, basic demographic grouping did not account for variations in resilience. To summarize these findings, first, neither age nor educational hiatus showed a significant correlation with resilience. These factors didn't appear to influence how participants scored on the BRS. Second, although males had significantly higher resilience scores on average, the gender difference was not statistically significant. Third, the ANOVA test showed no significant differences in resilience between different age groups or hiatus categories. Taken together, these results suggest that background demographic factors did not predict resilience in this sample of trainee counsellors. These findings suggest that resilience is less tied to who trainees are demographically and more to what kind of support and learning environment they are in. The fact that age, gender, and hiatus did not predict resilience supports a process-based model of resilience. Now, Wendell described resilience as something shaped over time by life events and support structures, and is not a fixed rate, right? Other papers highlight that reflective practice, supervision, and emotional safety are key in developing resilience during training. That study reinforces that view, that suggesting that what happens during training is more influential than who the trainer is before it. So rather targeting interventions based on background traits, we need to focus on providing universally supportive environments that help all trainees build resilience, no matter their starting point. These findings offer several important implications for counselling education and trainee support. First, the absence of significant effects across the demographic variables suggests that we shouldn't rely on demographic assumptions to predict which students thrive under pressure. Resilience does not appear to be something people bring with them, but instead it seems to grow within the training environment itself. Because of this, emotional development should be treated as a core part of the curriculum alongside academic and clinical content. Structured activities like reflective writing, process groups, and relational supervision can help trainees develop the internal resources they need to cope with the demands of the role. It's important to recognize that resilience may not be visible at the point of admission. Students who seem confident on paper may still struggle when faced with emotional challenges. That's why support systems should be proactive, not just reactive. And it should be available throughout training, especially during placements or client work. Finally, the findings suggest that resilience flourishes in environments that promote connection, purpose, and emotional safety. Now, as some papers have noted, creating a sense of belonging and supporting psychological well-being are essential to long-term success, not just for individual trainees, but for profession as a whole. Like any study, this one had its limitations. The sample size was relatively small and participants were self-selecting, which may limit how broadly we can generalize the results. There was also a gender imbalance with far fewer male and non-binary participants, which reduced the power of the gender analysis and excluded the gender diverse voices that deserve more attention in future work. Because all data were self-reported through an online survey, there's also a possibility of bias. Participants may have responded in ways that reflected self-perception rather than objective behavior. And while the BRS is well validated, it doesn't capture relational or situational aspects of resilience that may be especially relevant in counselling training. Now, the study was also cross-sectional, meaning to say it only captured resilience at one single point of time. We can't say how resilience might change throughout training, but perhaps something of a longitudinal design could. Additionally, I collected data on financial security and social support, but did not analyze these variables. Including them in future studies could offer a more complete picture, especially for students balancing education with work or caregiving responsibilities. Now, looking ahead, future research could explore how resilience evolves across the stages of counselling training. compare full-time and part-time students perhaps, or use a cross-cultural design to explore differences in how resilience is supported. Now, there's also room to investigate how educators and supervisors can actively promote resilience in their students. To conclude, this study set out to examine whether age, gender, or educational hiatus predicted resilience in trainee counselors. The findings did not support those assumptions. None of the demographic variables were significantly associated with resilience scores. Instead, what emerged was a picture of resilience as something shaped more by training experiences, relational support, and emotional development by background traits. This supports a shift in thinking from seeing resilience as something students already have to something that can be nurtured and built during the course of training. For counselling education, this means designing environments that promote self-reflection, supervision, and psychological safety, not just academic achievement. Thank you so much for listening. Like, share, subscribe. Bye-bye.